Introduction. Lost to oneself in the noise. The most connected age, the most disconnected self. When did we begin to fear being alone? Any moment of quiet, and we reach for the phone. A few seconds in an elevator becomes difficult to endure. Unable to bear the silence, people hurl themselves into noise. And yet something is strange. We're more connected to more people than at any point in history. So why does the heart feel lonelier, not less? MIT professor Sherry Turkle, in her book Alone Together, named this paradox precisely. We are endlessly connected and yet disconnected from ourselves. Constant checking and responding can quietly erode the capacity to remain with oneself. So what is solitude, and why have wise people across history treated time alone as something to be treasured? The two faces of being alone. Being alone comes to us wearing two different faces. One is loneliness, the feeling of abandonment, disconnection, of reaching no one and being reached by no one. The other is solitude, the time of returning to oneself, clearing away the noise, listening to the voice in the deepest part of the heart. What is the difference? And how can solitude make a life deeper and more solid? The real reason we fear being alone. The 17th century French philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote, "All of humanity's problems stem from a single cause: the inability to sit quietly alone in a room." He didn't simply mean sit still. His insight was that people, rather than face the anxiety within themselves, continually flee into the noise outside. We're not too busy for solitude. We may make ourselves busier precisely because we fear it. When we grow still, buried questions rise. Am I living well? What am I afraid of? That discomfort may be the door to self-understanding. Part 1. Loneliness and solitude are not the same. The boundary between deprivation and choice. British psychiatrist Anthony Storr, in Solitude, A Return to the Self, drew a clear line. Loneliness is the painful deprivation of connection, feeling pushed outside relationship without wanting it, a passive state in which no one seems to know your heart. Solitude is aloneness that has been chosen, not flight from the world, but an active return to oneself. Paul Tillich put it this way: loneliness expresses the pain of being alone. Solitude expresses the glory of being alone. Same physical state, but loneliness comes from the loss of others. Solitude from the finding of oneself. Hannah Arendt, Being with Oneself. For Hannah Arendt, solitude was the state of being able to hold a conversation with yourself, alone, but with an inner dialogue flowing. Loneliness, by contrast, is being unable to be even with oneself. You can be surrounded by people and still be lonely if no one truly knows you. And you can be alone and at peace if the relationship with yourself remains unbroken. Loneliness does not stay in the heart. To speak of solitude's value is not to romanticize loneliness. Prolonged loneliness is now a public health concern. In 2023, U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy warned that social disconnection may carry health risks comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The WHO's 2025 report estimated that 1 in 6 people worldwide experiences loneliness, and that the resulting mortality may reach 100 deaths per hour globally. So this video is not a case against connection. People need warmth and genuine relationship. The point is simply this: no relationship can substitute for one's relationship with oneself. Solitude and connection, held in balance, is what makes a life whole. Part 2. The nature of solitude as philosophy has found it. Thoreau, no better companion than solitude. In 1845, Henry David Thoreau took an axe to Walden Pond and lived alone for 2 years. He didn't go there to cut himself off entirely. He chose silence to see what in life was essential and what was merely unnecessary noise. He wrote, "I never found a companion that was so companionable as solitude." This isn't a statement that people are unnecessary. It's the observation that only those who can be with themselves are free to meet others freely. The person who can't bear to be alone tends to cling to relationships. The person who has learned solitude doesn't lose themselves inside them. Thomas Merton, to love more deeply. The monk and writer Thomas Merton saw solitude not as escape, but as the time of recovering an inner spring so that one might love more deeply. The person who has looked at their own fears and wounds in time alone grows more careful before the suffering of others. Those who have seen their own darkness don't judge another's darkness carelessly. Solitude may not be a severing of relationship. It may be the preparation for loving more truly. Carl Jung, what is heard only in stillness. Carl Jung wrote, "Solitude is the condition of inner life. Only when the outer world falls away does the inner world begin to appear. Within the voices of others, the expectations of society, the roles and masks, it's impossible to meet your true self. Only in solitude do all of those grow quiet." Solitude is not a losing of the self. It is the finding of the self that had been lost. Rilke, the courage to live with the questions. In Letters to a Young Poet, Rainer Maria Rilke advised a young poet who was searching for answers about direction and meaning in life. Rather than grasping for answers, Rilke counseled him to love the questions themselves, to live alongside what had not yet been resolved. If one can do that, life itself may one day become the answer. Solitude is the space in which one can remain with those questions quietly. Thoreau, Merton, Jung, Rilke, they all point toward the same thing. Solitude is not disappearing from the world. It is calling back the self that the world has swept away. Monk Bob Jung, what becomes visible in emptying. Korean Buddhist monk Bob Jung spoke of musoyu, non-possession. Solitude works the same way. Not the discarding of relationship, but setting down what has clung too heavily. Noise, comparison, the craving for recognition. When those are released, certain things become visible. What you truly desire. What is wearing you down. The inner voice you have long looked away from. Yoon Dong-ju, eyes deepen through solitude. Korean poet Yoon Dong-ju wrote in his preface poem of hoping, "Until the day I die, not a single stain of shame would cross the sky above him." He was a poet who looked quietly at himself, rather than raising his voice to persuade the world. His solitude was not disconnection, it was the deep self-examination through which he felt the pain of his era more acutely. When time alone flows into self-pity, it becomes loneliness. When it deepens into self-reflection, it becomes the strength to endure. Kim Hoon, solitude as a condition of life. Korean novelist Kim Hoon saw solitude as an unavoidable condition of existence. We entered the world alone. We crossed the threshold of death alone. For him, solitude was not tragedy. It was the humility of receiving life as it actually is. Only those who can endure their own loneliness are capable of forming mature relationships without dependence. Only those who can stand wholly alone can truly welcome another person. Part 3. What neuroscience and psychology have found about the power of solitude. The brain that wakes when nothing is happening. Neuroscience has uncovered something remarkable. When we're quietly alone, without external stimulation, the brain activates what's called the default mode network, responsible for self-reflection, empathy, creative connection, and future planning. When we focus on external input, scrolling phones, watching videos, this network actually deactivates. But when we're quietly doing nothing, the brain begins to work in its deepest mode. This is why creative ideas tend to arrive in the shower. Solitude aids creativity. This is not mere romanticism. The capacity for solitude, a marker of maturity. Contemporary psychology has given growing attention to positive solitude. Anthony Storr wrote, "The capacity to be alone is one of the markers of maturity. The capacity to be with yourself is as important as the capacity to be with others." The person who cannot endure solitude becomes endlessly dependent on others, which exhausts relationships and leads to deeper loneliness. The person who can receive solitude with ease is freer and more abundant in relationship. Solitude as the time to realign the self. Over the course of a day, we absorb an enormous number of voices, news, evaluations, demands, the language of comparison on social media. In all that noise, the voice of your own heart is easily buried. At some point, you lose the ability to distinguish what you want from what others want from you. Solitude is what's needed at that moment. The time of gathering your scattered self back together. Becoming aware of what your emotions actually are, which relationships give life and which drain it away. Hamsakhon, only those who can be alone can truly be together. Korean thinker Ham Seok-hyun held that genuine togetherness begins with first meeting yourself. The person who hasn't met themselves is easily swept along, even in company. But the person who can stand alone can meet the world again and more deeply. Solitude is not flight from society. It is the inner preparation needed to participate in the world more fully. Part 4. Why those who can endure solitude become stronger. The courage to face one's emotions. Those who can endure time alone become stronger because they don't run from their own emotions. Whether it's anxiety, loneliness, or hollowness, they practice looking at the feeling as it is. Emotions grow larger when avoided and slowly reveal their form when met. The moment a name is given to a feeling, it begins to lose its power. I'm not abandoned. I'm simply lonely right now. I haven't failed. I've temporarily lost my direction. The ability to make these distinctions is what allows the heart to become, gradually, more solid. Recovering the standard of one's own life. When we spend long stretches among people, we begin to compare who has succeeded more, who is more loved. The longer comparison goes on, the more the standard of your own life migrates outward. In solitude, you can ask again, what is it that I truly value? Not the life others say is good, but the life I can honestly account for. The person who can ask these questions is not easily swept away. Making relationships more mature. The person who cannot be alone turns relationships into dependence. The other must fill them. The other must dissolve their anxiety, but this becomes a burden on the other. The person who has learned solitude can attend to some part of their loneliness themselves, so the relationship grows lighter and freer. A good relationship may be one where each person's solitude is respected, even while remaining in each other's company. Beyond loneliness into solitude. In the Confucian tradition, there is a teaching called Shindok, the practice of not deceiving yourself. When alone, of quietly attending to your own heart even when no one is watching. Those who can endure solitude become stronger, not because they feel no loneliness, but because they know how to pass through loneliness and enter solitude and remain there. That difference is what forms the grain of a life. Part 5. Living solitude in everyday life. What obscures solitude? 3 things obstruct the practice of solitude. First, mistaking loneliness for solitude. If the heart has been collapsing for too long, with no one to speak to, and the will to live fading, that is not solitude. It's a loneliness asking to be cared for. Second, allowing time alone to flow into self-pity. If being alone only repeats, "Why am I so alone?" that time deepens pain rather than insight. Third, filling solitary time with constant stimulation. If the body is alone, but the eyes are on screens, and the hands are scrolling, the heart is still inside the noise. 10 minutes of quiet. Solitude doesn't require a mountain retreat. 10 minutes before sleep tonight, with the phone set down. Walking alone with the music off, simply walking. At first, thoughts scatter, but somewhere along the way, the tangled threads inside begin slowly to loosen. Try writing one question down. What stayed with me longest in my heart today? What am I avoiding lately? What do I truly want? Even one of these transforms vague emptiness into a time of self-understanding. Remaining oneself, even while together. Solitude isn't only for people who live alone. It's needed by those with family, a partner, many friends. Without it, we're easily swept up in relationships. The other's emotion becomes our emotion. The other's expectation becomes our obligation. Solitude is not the time of ending relationship. It's the time of not losing yourself within it. Conclusion. Finding oneself, again in the space of being alone. The time that makes a life deeper. The thinkers and poets we've met today lived in different ages, and yet they pointed toward the same place. Solitude is not the time of disappearing from the world. It's the time of finding again the self that has been buried by the world's noise. And contemporary psychology and neuroscience confirm that quiet intervals of time play a real role in self-reflection, recovery, and creativity. Solitude is not the abandonment of the self. It's the time of making your way back to yourself. When the sounds of the world grow briefly distant, a voice in the heart becomes at last audible. The person who listens to that voice, slowly and honestly, deepens a little at a time. The grain of today. First, loneliness and solitude are different. Loneliness is an unwanted severance. Solitude is the chosen time of returning to yourself. Second, solitude is not the refusal of relationship. It's the time of recovering an inner spring so you can love more deeply. It's because you can be alone that you can approach others more healthily. Third, solitude clears away inner noise and allows you to recover your own standards. In quiet time, you can become aware of what you want and what is exhausting you. Fourth, those who can endure solitude become stronger. Not because they feel no loneliness, but because they know how to pass through it and enter solitude. Fifth, in the time of doing nothing, the brain works most deeply. Creativity, self-reflection, and emotional recovery all grow in solitude. Sixth, solitude is a choice, but loneliness is a signal. Freely chosen time alone deepens a life, but prolonged, unwanted isolation is a different matter, not something to ignore, but a signal that care and connection are needed. Just one thing, starting today. Today, try just 10 minutes. Phone down, music off, nothing to do. If it feels uncomfortable, let the discomfort be there. No pressure to accomplish anything. Simply be with that time. At first, it may seem like nothing is there, but as these minutes accumulate, a voice will begin to be heard from within. A voice that hadn't been audible for a long time. To begin hearing that voice is where the grain of a life starts to come clear. Loneliness arises from the loss of others. Solitude arises from the finding of yourself. The person who understands this difference is whole, even alone. An unseen current has carried us to this place. The years that passed unspoken shaped us into who we are. Life is always flowing, and we live by carving our grain upon its quiet course. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end. I hope this story has become a pair of eyes that see your life a little more deeply than they did before. Wisdom heard once tends to pass us by, but wisdom heard many times becomes the language of our own lives. If something resonated with you, we invite you to listen again. Each time you do, something new will reveal itself. Life cannot be explained. It only gathers, grain by grain, in silence. The grain of life loves you always. I hope your today is a little stronger than your yesterday. We will return with stories that go deeper still.